Good day everyone, this is Jessica Passion. I will be the reporter for this moment. So this time, we'll be discussing about Module 12 Physical Development of Infants and Toddlers. We have just traced the development process before birth. We shall continue to trace the developmental process by following the infant or the baby who is just born up to when the reaches age 2. The period that comes after prenatal or antenatal stage is infancy, which is in turn is followed by toddlerhood. Infancy and toddlerhood span the first 2 years of life. Cephalocaudal and proximodistal patterns. Cephalocaudal trend is the postnatal growth from conception to 5 months when the head grows more than the body. This cephalocaudal trend of growth that applies to the development of the fetus also applies in the first months after birth. Infants learn to use their upper limbs before their limbs. The same pattern occurs in the head area because the top parts of the head area, the eyes and the brain, grow faster than the lower parts such as the jaw. Proximodistal trend is the prenatal growth from 5 months to birth when the fetus grows from the inside of the body outwards. This also applies in the first months after birth as shown as in the earlier maturation of muscular control of the trunk and arms followed by the hands and fingers. When referring of motor development, the proximodistal trend refers to the development of motor skills from the center of the body outward. Height and weight. It's normal for newborn babies to drop 5 to 10% of their body weight within a couple of weeks of birth. That is due to the baby's adjustment to new natal feeding. Once they adjust to sucking, swallowing, and digesting, they grow rapidly. Breastfeed babies are typically heavier than bottle-feed babies through the first 6 months. After the 6 months, breastfeed babies usually weigh less than bottle-feed babies. In general, an infant's length increases by about 30% in the first 5 months. A baby's weight usually triples during the first year but slows down in the second year of life. Low percentages are not a cause for alarm as long as infants progress along a natural curve of steady development. Brain development, myelination, or myelinization, the process by which the axons are covered and insulated by layers of fat cells, begin prenatally and continues after birth. The process of myelination or myelinization increases the speed at which information travels to the nervous system. At birth, the newborn's brain is about 25% of its adult weight. By the second birthday, the brain is about 75% of its adult weight. Shortly after birth, a new baby's brain produces trillions more connections between neurons than it can possibly use. The brain eliminates connections that are seldom or never used. The infant's brain is literally waiting for experiences to determine how connections are made. A study on rats conducted by Mark Rosenzweig in 1969 revealed that the brains of rats that grow up in the enriched environment develops better than the brains of the animals reared in standard or isolated conditions. The brains or reared standard or isolated conditions, the brains of the enriched animals weigh more, had higher levels of neurochemical activity. Such finding implies that enriching the lives of infants who live in impoverished environments can produce positive changes in their development. Depressed brain activity has been found in children who grow up in a depressed environment. Motor development. Along this aspect of motor development, infants and toddlers begin from reflexes to gross motor skills and fine motor skills. There are kind of reflexes. The newborn has some basic reflexes which are which are of course automatic and serve as survival mechanisms before they have the opportunity to learn. Many reflexes which are present at birth will generally subside within a few months as the baby grows and matures. There are many different reflexes. Some of some of the most common reflexes that babies that have. First is sucking reflex. The sucking reflex is initiated when something touches the roof of an infant's mouth. Infants have a strong sucking reflex which helps to ensure they can latch onto a bottle or breast. The sucking reflex is very strong in some infants and they may need to suck on a pacifier for comfort. The second is rooting reflex. The rooting reflex is most evident when as infant's cheek is stroked. The baby responds by turning his or her head in the direction of the touch and opening their mouth for feeding. Next is gripping reflex. Babies will grasp anything that is placed in their palm. The strength of this grip is strong, and most babies can support their entire weight in their grip. Curling reflex. When the inner sole of the baby's foot is stroked, the infants respond by curling his or her toes. When the outer sole of a baby's foot is stroked, the infant will respond by spreading out their toes. Startle motor reflex. Infants will respond to sudden sounds or movements by throwing their arms and legs out and throwing their heads back. Most infants will usually cry when startled and proceed to pull their limbs back into their bodies. And the next is gallant reflex. The gallant reflex is shown when an infant's middle or lower back is stroked. Next to the spinal cord, the baby will respond by curving his or her body toward the side which is being stroked. And lastly, the tonic neck reflex. The tonic neck reflex is demonstrated in infants who are placed on their abdomens. Whichever side the child's head is facing, the limbs on the side will straighten, while the opposite limbs will curl. So let us proceed to gross motor skills. It is always a source of excitement for parents to witness dramatic changes in the infant's first year of life. This dramatic motor development is shown in babies unable to even lift their heads to being able to grab things off the cabinet, to chase the ball, and to walk away. Next is fine motor skills. Fine motor skills that involve a refined use of the small muscles controlling the hand and fingers and the thumb also. The development of these skills is allows one to be able to complete tasks such as writing, drawing, and bottoning. The ability to exhibit fine motor skills involve activities that involve precise eye-hand coordination. The development is reaching and grasping becomes more refined during the first 2 years of life. Initially, infants show only crude shoulder and elbow movements, but later they show wrist movements, hand rotation, and coordination of. And what are some research findings regarding newborns' visual perceptions? Can newborns see? The newborn's vision is about 10 to 30 times lower than normal adult vision. By 6 months of age, vision becomes better, and by the first birthday, the infant's vision approximates that of an adult. Infants look at different things for different lengths of time. In an experiment conducted by Robert Funtz, it was found out that infants preferred to look at patterns such as faces and concentric circles rather than at color or brightness. Based on these results, it is likely that pattern perception has an innate basis. Among the first few things that babies learn to recognize is their mother's face, mother's feeds, and nurses. Can newborns hear? The sense of hearing in an infant develops much before the birth of the baby. When in the womb, the baby hears his or her mother's voice and music. Infant sensory thresholds are somewhat higher than those of adult, which means the stimulus must be louder to be heard by a newborn than by an adult. And next, can newborns differentiate odors? In an experiment conducted by McFarlane, young infants who were breastfed or something showed clear preference for smelling their mother's breast pad when they were 6 days old. This preference did not show when the babies were only 2 days old. This shows that it requires several days of experience to recognize their mother's breastpad odor. Can newborns feel pain? Do they respond to touch? They do feel pain. Newborn males show a higher level of cortisol, means an indicator of stress, after a circumcision than prior to surgery. Babies respond to touch also. And can newborns distinguish the different tastes? In a study conducted with babies only 2 are old, babies made different facial expressions. When they taste sour, sweet, and bitter solution. When saccharin was added to the amniotic fluid of a near-term fetus, increased swallowing was observed. This indicates that sensitivity to taste might be present before birth. Do infants relate information through several senses? In short, are infants capable of intermodal perception? Intermodal perception is the ability to relate, connect, and integrate information about 2 or more sensory modalities such as vision and hearing. In a study conducted by Spilk and Osley, it was found out that as early as at 3.5 months old, infants look more at their mother when they also heard her voice, and longer at their father when they also heard his voice. This capacity for intermodal perception or ability to connect information coming through various modes get sharpened considerable through experience. And that would be all, and let us proceed to the next reporter, the continuation of Module 12.